Welcome to the Nightclub, guys. It's your host, Night Wrencher. And so today, this is more of a response video to the Driveway Engineer. If you guys don't know, he posts a lot of like LS stuff and LS conversion stuff, mainly on EFI applications. But he's a really cool guy. His channel's I get a lot of information from his channel. It's super cool. You guys should go check it out. But he just recently uploaded a video how to install an electric fuel pump inside of a legacy application, and he went through a couple things. One thing that he didn't go through that I'm going to show you right now is how to retrofit your existing setup in order to attach yourself a electric fuel pump. So right here I've got myself sorry, my dogs are barking, but I've got the return line. This used to be, well, it still is actually, the little breather hose for my fuel tank. So I've got the breather hose. It's very low PSI, so I don't really bother to put a clamp on it, but you probably should. I will eventually. I've got a 5/16 line that that's going to be used as a return line for my regulator. I've got the supply line. The whole system is 5/16. Then I've got 3 wires going into my existing pickup. Now, the 3 wires that I've got here, I installed a weather pack connector, and we've got 3 wires going on. The white wire is a ground. The ground is shared by both the electric fuel pump and the fuel sender. If you're not going to be using a fuel sender, then you'll only really be using 2 wires, not 3. But the third wire is there for your fuel sender. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart, and I'll show you guys what's inside. All right, everything's unhooked. I'm just going to go ahead and pull out my system here. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so this is my setup right here. So I've got what I was showing you earlier. Focus. Okay, what I was showing you earlier. And then I've got the ground. This one's the ground for the stock ground for the sending unit. And then I've added an additional ground. That one's for my fuel pump. So as you can see, I've grounded down, I've soldered together both of the ground wires so that the same ground for the sending unit is the same ground for the pump. So I've got the power line, that's this red line, and that's going to the positive side of the fuel pump. That's going up and coming out through the vent line tube. So this was originally for the evap system. I'm not using evap, so I don't need it. The hole is so small and it protrudes so far down that you don't really need any kind of like seal or anything like that. Fuel doesn't get out in any way, shape, or form. Plus, you still have the vent for your filler. And basically, what this consists of, this particular pump is from a '89 Dodge Ram first generation TBI 318. So it's fuel injected, but it only puts out about a maximum of 15 psi. Normally anywhere from 12 to 13. And this, because I'm running on a carburetor application, this provides sufficient flow, and I just have to turn down the pressure by allowing more fuel to bypass. So basically, the original system was this metal tube used to come down here. Then from here on forward, there used to be like this little filter, like this cylinder looking thing, and that used to suck up fuel by the mechanical pump over by the engine. I've cut that section off because number one, it's completely rusted out, and number two, I needed to make room. So a lot of these pumps come with a little nipple. It's really cold, so it's kind of hard to breathe. It comes with a little nipple for you to attach. This is a 5/16 hose. I'm sure if you were to look up different applications, you can find different applications with different fittings, or if the parts guys are really nice, they'll let you go in the back and then see which ones work for you, cross-reference the part number, see how much PSI it puts out. But for a carburetor application, you don't really want to go more than this. You can if you want to. You're just going to have to work a little bit more to turn down that PSI. and deadhead regulators don't work, so I'll be showing you that in a sec. And then this is my stock fuel sender. Because I'm using the Toyota cluster, I did have to bend the rod a little bit, so the maximum and the minimums were adjusted. And then it comes with this sock that you can replace if you need to. And this pump actually ran me about $45. And then if you get like the more expensive ones, they run like 60 or 80, or you can get a Walbro 255 or something like that, or a different one like Driveway Engineer. You can get something like that, but this is my basic setup. Let's jump to the front. One last thing before you end up sealing everything up, make sure everything is nice and connected tightly, because if something like this gets disconnected, you're going to be stranded and you're going to need to get to it somehow. And if you don't have jack or tools or anything, you're going to be calling AAA. And I know there's plenty of flow because I can open the filler and you can actually hear the return. So alright, now let's actually go to the front this time. Alright, so this is what I've got for the front. I've got a fuel pressure regulator, which honestly I paid too much for because it didn't even work for me. I've got the return line that I rigged onto one of the outlets, and then I've got the supply line to my carburetor going from the other outlets, and then the bottom one is the inlet from the tank. So this is a deadhead style regulator, which means this was supposed to be used with a mechanical pump that only puts out about 6, 7, 8 psi, and this thing blocked off anything above that and dropped it down to whatever pressure that you wanted it to. The thing was that because we're using an electric pump, deadhead regulators, once you exceed a certain amount of pressure creep will just keep increasing until you're overflowing your motor. So I had to include a return line going back down into the tank. So if your regulator, well, you don't even have to use a regulator if you don't want to. And then you've got your supply line coming in from the bottom. So you can actually use this, you can use a T instead of a regulator, and the way you can block off the return side, you can go ahead and add like a little valve or something, and you basically leave it wide open the very first time you run it, and then it should register you should probably have a gauge on there. Even if you don't have a regulator, you should probably still have a gauge on it. So while you let's say your gauge is on the rail, when you first start up your fuel system, don't hook it up directly to your carburetor. You're going to overflow. You're going to blow through the needle and seat. You're going to flood your carburetor. If it's an Edelbrock, same thing. You don't want to hook up your electric fuel pump directly to your carburetor. That would be really bad. I did hydrolock this motor the very first time I did that without even realizing it, because the filter was on it. Fuel was just pouring into the engine and it wouldn't spin anymore. So I did have to pull the fuel out of that one. So basically you got your supply line, you've got your feed, and then you need a return line back into the tank. And basically you start off with the valve wide open, and it should register at 0 psi, and then you start closing the valve slowly, and you're going to start seeing pressure go up. You're going to stop right around anywhere from 5 to 6.5 psi. I usually run around 4 psi. I can go a little bit higher if I want to, but I do hear that the pump gets a little bit more strained, so I try to keep it a little bit lower. 4 psi on constant flow electric fuel pump is more than plenty for what I need it for. If you're doing high performance application, you want to probably step it up for like a Walbro 255, and just turn the pressure down just so you can get a little bit more flow in terms of that. So that's all on the hydraulic or the fuel side. In terms of the electrical part of things, I've got this black relay. That's how I know this is my fuel relay, because I'm always constantly disconnecting it. And I've got it paired with the 15 amp fuse. You don't want to run this pump without a fuse. If you have a short in the pump, which you might in case the pump ever goes bad, or if you end up having like something stuck into the pump to the point where it can't spin anymore, you're going to be pulling a lot of amps, and you do need a fuse in there as well. So you've got your relay, you got your fuse, you've got your trigger for the relay, which is my ignition switch. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that right now. I really hope you can hear that, but let's see if you can hear the relay click. So that click means that it's activated. Ground for this is just regular ground, the same grounds you use for everything else. You should probably keep all your grounds fairly close together so you can keep tabs on what's being grounded by what and how. You got your trigger from the ignition switch, then you've got your main power for the relay coming straight from your battery or a battery lug. In my case, I've got a battery lug on my firewall behind the dash, which is where my main feed for my battery comes in through here. I've got like a 50 amp relay or something, or a 50 amp fuse, I think, or if not, actually I think it's more like a 100 amp fuse coming in on the bulkhead, and then that's got one line coming to my fuse box, and that powers up my whole fuse box. And then I've got power going to the relay. From here it travels through the 15 amp fuse out to the pump. Depending on the type of pump, you might want to go either higher or lower, but 15 amps is usually the standard in case you want to start from there. If you notice that it's pulling more power, go up to 20, go up to 25, go up to 30, but be very careful and keep an eye on how hot the wires are getting, because you might actually have a problem with too thin gauge of a wire. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the diagram up on the screen in case you guys need to figure out how to wire up a relay. There's a lot of cool videos on YouTube. Again, shout out to the driveway engineer for giving me an idea for this video, and I hope this seems to help somebody out in the near future. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Night Wrencher out.